Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is indeed an honour to open this debate. Madam Deputy Speaker, we live in the best country in the world, a country which leads on the world stage as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, in NATO, the G7, the G20, and of course the Commonwealth. We are the only major country which is simultaneously meeting the NATO target of spending 2% of our GDP on defence and the UN target of spending 0.7% of GNI on international development. We should be proud of meeting both these targets, maintaining our security while supporting some of the poorest and most vulnerable people across the world. Targets that this government, under the Prime Minister, will continue to honour. Targets that are only possible with a strong economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, yesterday my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, set out a very positive agenda for government, a positive vision of what we can achieve working together, delivering on the priorities of people across the whole of the United Kingdom. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we are to move forward, we must first get Brexit done.
As goes for priorities of people across the United Kingdom, as he's just said, studies in Scotland have shown that the worst place to be badly affected or adversely affected by Brexit will be my constituency in Hillingham and Yere. What direct money will the UK government be compensating the people of Hillingham and Yere with, and what quantity for the political project that is their project, Brexit, that's going to see us getting the worst effects of Brexit with? Well put.
Minister.
I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is always incredibly negative about the future of our country. I wish he would be more positive. I wish he would actually support the Union. He wants to break up our country. That is not something we want on this side of the House. Yes, of course.
Very grateful to my right honourable friend. He talked about the importance of the United Kingdom helping and engaging with third world countries. Will he accept that when we pull out of the European Union, we will be able to give Commonwealth and third world countries much greater access to our marketplace rather than the current protectionist racket of the European Union?
Well, indeed, Madam Speaker, and I will come on to that, but of course, once we are out of the European Union, we will be able to set our own trade policy. Now, yes, of course.
I thank him for giving way. Let me be equally positive as he is about our place in the world. This government has made a big effort in order to encourage investment from Israel and to encourage bilateral treaties with Israel. What is going to happen in the future about that, and how are we going to take that forward?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work he also does as a trade envoy in Africa. And he talks about trade deals in the future. We, of course, are having relentlessly positive discussions about those. But I said, we must first make sure we get Brexit done before we move on to the next stage of this agenda. And I just want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I campaigned to remain in the European Union. But ahead of the referendum vote, I said that I would respect the outcome of the national referendum. And along with a vast majority of members in this House, I stood in 2017 on a manifesto to deliver on the outcome of the referendum. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is high time that we honoured that promise to respect the vote to leave. And we must get Brexit done. We do want to leave the European Union with a deal. And that is why we have set out our fair and reasonable proposals. And should we get a deal, I believe that it is the responsibility of this whole House to deliver Brexit without further delay. Give way.
The Minister is very generous giving way. Can I point out I stood on a manifesto promising to fight for there to be a second referendum, a referendum on the deal, so the people can have the final say on whatever is stitched up in the vape-filled rooms in Brussels and in London. Can I also point out to him, though, in the Lake District, when we have a marvellous export, our tourism industry, we rely 1 in 3 of our staff are from overseas, most of whom from the EU. His government's proposals of a £30,000 salary floor for those people would decimate our tourism industry. Will he sort that out before he causes such enormous harm, such an important part of our economy?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we of course have an immigration bill which is coming forward, which will be focused on a points-based system, making sure that people who come here have the skills that this country requires. But I would just say to the honourable gentleman that he calls himself a Liberal Democrat. I have to say, his policy is illiberal and anti-democratic. Yes, of course.
Thank you. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. In my constituency, 73% of people voted to leave. They didn't directly express how they wanted to leave, but what I hear day after day after day is that we must leave, and we must leave on the 31st. We must. I know there are people who are concerned about a no-deal Brexit. The best way to avoid a no-deal Brexit is to support a deal in this House, and so that we can all leave with some degree of security.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, Madam Deputy Speaker. What should be happening is that we should be coming together. But I have to say, looking at the benches opposite, that we could have left the European Union by now if they had only supported the previous deal. They did not do that. They did not do that, Madam Deputy Speaker. And what I would say now, they are the ones who put jobs and economy and the business at risk as a result of not supporting this government. I want to continue, Madam Deputy Speaker, because when we leave the European Union, there will be opportunities across the world. And as my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said yesterday, this Conservative government will ensure that the United Kingdom continues to play a leading role in global affairs, defending our interests, promoting our values and seizing those opportunities.
I'm most grateful for the Secretary of State in giving way. Countries around the world are judged by the values they stand for. The United Kingdom always advocates for democracy around the world. And what does the Secretary of State not agree with me? That if we do not deliver on the mandate that the public gave us in 2016, it will be completely and utterly wrong, undermine our democratic process. And therefore we should leave on the 31st of October with a deal, if not without a deal.
Madam Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. What unfortunately has happened over the last few months when we did not leave at the end of March was indeed a sapping of trust in democratic processes across our country. And that is why we must leave on the 31st of October. Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way. In evidence to the Brexit Select Committee, he talked about a no-deal Brexit. The representative of the National Farmers Union in Northern Ireland, when asked what a no-deal Brexit would mean for his industry, replied that it would be catastrophic. Yeah. Would he like to explain to farmers in Northern Ireland and everyone else who would be affected why it is the government's policy, if there is not a deal, that catastrophe should be inflicted upon the farmers of a part of the United Kingdom?
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say that I do have a lot of respect for the honourable gentleman, but what I would say to him is that, and I'm sorry to have to say this to him, but the bill that he brought forward, which we refer to as a Surrender Act now. I know other colleagues would refer to it separately, but we refer to Surrender Act. I'm afraid what that bill did actually reduce the negotiating position of the government. And therefore, our policy still is the preference for a deal. But he must take his share of responsibility if we end up with no deal on the 31st of October. No, I won't, Madam Deputy. Let me make some more progress. I was talking about the opportunities that we will have outside the European Union, and of course there will be opportunities that will boost British businesses with strong trading relationships with countries around the world, championing free trade.
I'm very grateful to you. He talks about future opportunities for businesses. Quite rightly, I believe, this Parliament requires our businesses to observe very high standards of animal welfare, environmental regulations and workplace regulations. Will he make sure that future trade agreements don't undermine our competitiveness from imports from other jurisdictions that don't have to observe such high standards?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes a very important point, and as he will have seen in the Queen's speech and indeed in the speech the Prime Minister made yesterday, environmental issues are very much at the top of this government's agenda. Can I just move on talking about these opportunities, Madam Deputy Speaker, because, of course, in January our country will host governments from across Africa here in London for the UK-Africa Investment Summit. The summit will bring together businesses, governments and international institutions to encourage investment in Africa. This will also create opportunities for the City of London. Give way to the Honourable Lady.
I am very grateful. And it does seem surprising to me that people seem to believe that by leaving EU membership, actually, Britain will be decreasing our influence in the world, not increasing. Just to state the obvious. Now, 7 of the countries with a seat at the table in Brussels this week, they have a population smaller than Wales, yet they'll have greater influence over the future of Europe than the UK might have. Does my right honourable colleague not agree that Wales, therefore, will be better placed in the world with our own seat at the table, rather than this union of unequals?
Well, Minister. Firstly, Madam Deputy Speaker, could I just say that what on this side we're determined to do is to respect the outcome of a referendum. And actually, colleagues on all House, including some who now argue against it, at the time said this was once in a generation vote. Well, let's get together, let's respect the outcome of the referendum, and I have to say to her, I wish she was a bit more positive about our future as a country. I've outlined the fact that we lead the world in very many institutions. That will absolutely continue, and I hope that she will find that she is able to be a little bit more positive about our future. She may recall that in the aftermath of the vote to leave, there were very many people saying that actually the economy would turn down, we would lose jobs. That isn't what has happened. The economy has stayed strong. Employment is at record levels. Madam Deputy Speaker, may I just turn to my own department? And of course, in DFID, our ultimate goal in tackling poverty is to support countries to help themselves and meet the Sustainable Development Goals, to become economically self-sustaining, are trading partners of the future. I want developing countries to trade their way out of needing aid. Now, of course, the Shadow Chancellor sees business as the enemy. That is his stated position. We do not. We see it as an enabler. The private sector, Madam Deputy Speaker, has had the biggest impact in tackling poverty in the developing world in the last 100 years. And this government, as my honourable friend said, is relentlessly pursuing free trade agreements. These will benefit businesses and consumers in Britain and in the developing world. Madam Deputy Speaker, governments around the world collectively spend around $140 billion every year on aid. However, the United Nations estimates that an additional $2.5 trillion is required annually in developing countries to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. That investment gap needs to be met largely by the private sector. That is why I have established an International Development Infrastructure Commission to advise on how we can mobilise additional private sector funds. But Global Britain is about more than Brexit or free trade. It is also about the role we have to play in tackling some of the biggest issues facing our world. Of course, I'll give way.
For giving way. If we're going to be great again and set an example to these other countries and help them, we need to be a healthy nation across the country. So what is the government going to do about addressing health inequalities in our own nation and perhaps deliver the hospital for Stockton in my constituency, which was taken away by the Liberal Democrat Tory government in 2010?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have got record levels of investment going into the NHS. My honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced investments in hospitals. And what I would say to him that whether it is aid or indeed the public services, the only way we can find that money is to keep our economy strong. Something I have to say would not happen under the party opposite. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend, the Prime Minister, met leaders at the G7 this summer in Biarritz. All those countries support the UK's campaign to give every girl in the world 12 years of quality education. Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State for giving way. Britain can be proud of its global record of development, and will he encourage
some of those other European countries to step up and actually match Britain's international aid commitments. Countries like France and many others only contribute about half of their national wealth that this country does, and they can learn a lot from global Britain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend makes a very important point, and of course we urge all developed nations to be able to come forward and match us in our 0.7% target. What I would also say to him is that there are certain areas, such as, for instance, the fight against preventing the spread of Ebola is an area where the UK has been leading, and I think it would be very helpful if we had some of our international partners coming alongside us in that endeavour. If I may make a little bit of progress, and I will, of course, give way to her. Just to return to the issue on education, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said, all those countries and Berets supported the UK's campaign to make sure that every girl in the world receives 12 years of quality education. And of course, we know that educating girls is the tool that can address a whole host of the world's economic and social problems. Educating girls prevents child marriage and early pregnancy, helps women into the workforce, and boosts household incomes and economic growth. We announced new funding at the G7 to provide education for children around the developing world caught up in crisis and conflict. Girls, who are more than twice as likely to be out of school in conflict areas, stand to benefit the most from this support. Since 2015, the UK has supported almost 6 million girls to gain a decent education. And at the UN in September, the Prime Minister announced measures that will help to get over 12 million more children into school. This will boost future economic growth and improve women's rights in some of the poorest countries in the world. I give way to John.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I was listening very carefully when the Minister was talking about the importance of being positive about Brexit. But what I would like to say to the Minister is that the Institute for Fiscal Studies said last week that the UK is £60 billion worse off already as a result of Brexit, and we haven't left yet. Yeah. And it also said that the UK economy is now 2.5 to 3% smaller than it would be had the Brexit process not been started. But importantly for me, and the Minister will understand, I'm sure, 21% of my constituents in North Ayrshire are assessed as being vulnerable to the Brexit shock. What advice does the Minister have for the 21% of people in North Ayrshire who will be adversely affected?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady, I don't think, was in the House in 2010 when we had an emergency budget to deal with the economic mess we were left by the party opposite. And we remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, in those debates where, as a result of the policies we were putting in place, the opposition told us that there would be 1 million jobs lost. Almost 10 years on, there are over 3 million extra jobs in the economy. Wages are outpacing inflation, and we are seeing growth in the economy year after year. And what I would say to her, if she wants to avoid the uncertainty of no deal, why did she not support previous deals, and will she commit to supporting a deal if one comes back from the European Council?
You don't know.
Perhaps I can move, Madam Deputy Speaker, to another topic where we lead the world in tackling. This is in tackling climate change. We were the first major economy to legislate for net zero. And at the UN General Assembly, the Prime Minister doubled our support to help developing countries tackle climate change. Climate change is not a problem created in the developing world, but the world's poorest will be hit hardest by it. We have a responsibility to act. Some weeks ago, we saw the catastrophic effects of climate change in the Bahamas. The first responders on the ground saw the devastation caused by Hurricane Dorian. They described the scenes as apocalyptic. Roofs ripped from buildings, homes underwater, families left devastated by the loss of their loved ones. I'm proud, Madam Deputy Speaker, that our armed forces, supported by DFID and FCO expertise, led the British response. A joint global British response to a natural disaster. Sadly, disasters like these will become all the more common. Almost 1 million plant and animal species are at risk of extinction, with floods, droughts, and storms increasingly frequent, each one pushing yet more people into poverty. We cannot ignore this global threat. Madam Deputy Speaker, the bills announced by the Prime Minister yesterday will continue the world-leading efforts this Conservative government has taken to protect our environment. Our new Environment Bill will guide our country towards a cleaner and greener future. Under the Conservatives, we will continue to proudly lead the world in this area. I give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. What is the government doing to stop fracking on a global scale?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I would say to the Honourable Gentleman is perhaps he didn't listen to me when I talked about the fact that we were doubling our commitment in terms of international climate finance. There is an enormous amount of work that is going on in this area. More will be set out. And I would have thought those are the areas that he should actually be praising the government on. This is somewhere we have a joint and common endeavour. And I wish occasionally those on the benches opposite would actually be positive about what the government is doing and what we're achieving in the developing world to help the poorest people across the globe. But of course, if I may just make a little bit more progress, but of course, Mr. Speaker, it is not just on climate change and education that global Britain is leading the way. The senseless injustice of preventable deaths must end. Last week in Lyon, I announced more details of our pledge to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. AIDS is the biggest killer of women aged 15 to 49 globally. Our commitment to tackle these deadly diseases is a vital part of this Conservative government's decision to ramp up efforts to end preventable deaths of mothers, newborn babies and children in the poorest parts of the world by 2030. We're investing in British expertise and work with the international community to ensure that wherever somebody is born, they have access to the vital health services they need. And this must include sexual and reproductive health and rights for women. That is why, at the UN General Assembly, I announced a package that will help 20 million women and girls to gain access to family planning each year up to 2025.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for giving way. He is being very generous. A few minutes ago, he mentioned the vital role of our armed forces in doing good work around the world, and all of us of a right mind here support our armed forces. And as the member for North Wiltshire knows, the member for Glasgow South knows, Mr. Vladimir Putin is not about the good of the UK. He is not our friend. In tackling the Salisbury situation, the cooperation of our EU friends was crucial. Is it not, however, an incontrovertible truth that pulling out of our membership of the EU will make the task of our armed forces that much more difficult?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that is the case. Of course, we will continue to cooperate with friends around the world, and of course, we will continue to play a leading part in NATO. Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend.
I'm very pleased to hear what my right honourable friend says about what he's doing for women and girls around the world. Can he confirm that the government will also be looking at spending more and raising the profile of FGM, both here and abroad, and also female education, particularly primary?
Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend who did such good work during his time at the Foreign Office, looking and tackling at precisely these issues. And of course, we will continue to work and support initiatives in these areas. Mr. Speaker, if I may just continue, I will come back to him. Mr. Speaker, our country is leading the world in tackling some of the greatest challenges facing our planet today. Whether that is dealing with natural disasters or dealing with the fallout of humanitarian crisis around the world. Mr. Speaker, you only have to look at the support we have provided to the people fleeing Venezuela. We do not stand idly by whilst the Maduro regime brutalizes its people. Now, the leader of the Labour Party may celebrate the achievements of that despotic ruler, seeing it perhaps as his blueprint for Britain. We do not. The Honourable Lady talks about the fact that somehow what I'm saying is inaccurate. Well, perhaps.
Well, I didn't hear the word. If the word order. If the word used was that which has just been put to me. It was tasteless. And I know the Right Honourable Gentleman Member for East Devon means well. I'm not sure that I would regard him as a great arbiter on these important matters, though he may be starting to negotiate the learning curve, and I'm sure he's well-intentioned and he's trying his best. The Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, irrespective of whether that comment was offensive or not, can I just enlighten the honourable lady on what her leader actually said at a Solidarity with Venezuela event in 2015, and I quote. And this is what he said, the leader of the opposition. When we celebrate, and it is a cause, if she would only listen, when we celebrate, and it is a cause for celebration, the achievements of Venezuela in jobs, in housing, in health, in education, but above all in its role in the whole world as a completely different place. Then we do that because we recognize what they have achieved. My goodness, Mr. Speaker, if that is the sort of achievement we're going to have under the Labour government, it's pretty clear that they should not be let anywhere near Downing Street. And let me go back to the Venezuela of today, Mr. Speaker. An economy collapsed, public services collapsed, the very being of the country on life support. I'm very proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is in Britain that we have stepped forward to provide life-saving humanitarian support to millions of Venezuelans. Last month, I announced an aid package that will deliver life-saving medicine and clean water to those suffering from this dire crisis. Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, because it is the right thing to do.
My friend, give way. Cool. I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and he is on the subject of humanitarian crisis. A few weeks ago, a large group of us were in Bangladesh and witnessed the plight of the Rohingya. I know his department has announced more money to assist the Rohingya. What further efforts is his department going to make to lessen the plight of the Rohingya and enable them to return home to a safe environment?
Well, my honourable friend raises an incredibly important point. This is, of course, a major humanitarian crisis, and it's caused by the military in Myanmar. We have, of course, announced further funds, about £87 million, to provide food and healthcare and shelter, and that support will help to reach over 1 million refugees, but also, very importantly, host community members. In terms of relocations, of course, I commend the Bangladesh government for the support that they're providing, but we are very clear that we agree with the UNHCR's assessment that conditions are not in place yet to enable safe and sustainable returns to Rakhine State. I won't, Mr. Speaker, because I'm now going to wind up. Mr. Speaker, I spent a year as a minister in the Foreign Office, and I've now spent around 3 months in my current role. And as I've gone around the world, I have seen for myself and heard how highly regarded our country is. We are respected for our values, our support for democracy, for the rules-based international system, for championing economic empowerment across the world. Mr. Speaker, when the United Kingdom speaks, the world listens, and I commend the gracious speech to the House.